You want answers?
I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
You want answers?
You have offended my family.
I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth.
And you have offended a Shaolin temple.
You can't handle the truth.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Radical Rant.
I want to tell you about a conversation that takes place in most medical marijuana states all the time. Now, not California, and probably not in Colorado or Washington that much, but I can tell you secondhand that they take place a lot in Oregon. It boils down to something like this. I've been using marijuana for my chronic pain, and I came to get my medical marijuana card. How long have you had this chronic pain? Since the accident, about 12 years ago. Okay, all we need now is a copy of your medical records from your last 3 visits to your doctor that document your chronic pain. Doctor, are you listening to me? I grow marijuana for my chronic pain. I can't afford a doctor. I'm sorry, but if you can't prove your chronic pain with a diagnosis from 3 different doctor visits within the last 3 years, we can't give you a recommendation to use marijuana legally to treat the chronic pain that you can't prove. There are literally hundreds of thousands of people in Oregon alone who could benefit from using cannabis medically. However, the expense and the inconvenience presented by all the hoops they have to jump through makes getting a medical marijuana card more difficult than titling an out-of-state car in this state. Just trust me on that one. It's not easy. First, you got to have one of this narrow list of qualifying conditions. And then you have to see your doctor at least 3 times in 3 years where he or she verifies that your qualifying condition is in the chart notes, right? They got to write it down. Yes, he has chronic pain in his shoulder, whatever it might be. Then, even if you're an AIDS patient in a hospice waiting to die, you can't get your card without those records. Now, let's say that somehow you do have the ability to afford 3 or more doctor's visits to get your proof of pain, nausea, seizures, spasticity, glaucoma, cancer, AIDS, cachexia, or Alzheimer's agitation. So next, you have to go to a different, shall we say, more herbal-friendly clinic where staff will collect and review those records from your doctor visits, then have you evaluated by their doctor. And that doctor, if your records line up, will then write you a recommendation for medical marijuana. Now, why not just talk to your original 3 doctor visit for the recommendation? Well, that would be logical, wouldn't it? Your regular primary care doctor who's documenting your chronic pain would be nice if he would write the recommendation. Unfortunately, most doctors who would recommend medical marijuana for their patients cannot. They're restricted by their insurance, by their clinic, by their hospital, by their federal contract, even from just the general medical culture against being pot docs. And then others, they're just uneducated on the subject. They still believe marijuana couldn't possibly be medicine. So you end up with a handful of clinic doctors making the most of the recommendations that their colleagues can't or won't, and then they get excoriated in the media for being pot docs. So, after the expense of your 3 doctor visits and your 1 clinic visit, you then get to go to the state medical marijuana program office to turn in your recommendation and your $200 fee. You could easily be in for about $1,000 by this point. Oh yeah, and an extra $50 if you want to designate someone else to grow your marijuana. Now pick carefully, because if you want to change that grower later on, that's going to cost you $100. These fees in Oregon were raised recently because the medical marijuana program was running a surplus, and lawmakers appropriated that to balance other budgets like clean drinking water. Isn't it nice to know that the clean water in those famous downtown Portland Benson bubblers is funded by gouging sick people with cancer who choose cannabis over chemo? Now, in actuality, and no joke, people, in Oregon, the fees were raised specifically to reduce participation in the medical marijuana program. As State Representative Peter Buckley noted, quote, "There was an argument made that if the fees were a little higher, that would perhaps dissuade people who didn't need the cards from going down that road." End quote. which has got to be the dumbest public policy thinking in years. If your program has both needy, deserving patients and greedy weed dealers, guess who drops off the rolls and guess who chalks $200 up as the cost of doing business? If you've got both legitimate pain patients whose disability prevents employment, and you've got illegitimate pain fakers with jobs getting a card just to avoid arrest, guess who drops off the rolls, and guess who comes up with an extra $100 to stay out of jail and keep his job? All of this leads me to today's news out of Illinois from Illinois Representative Lou Lang, who says he's 1 or 2 votes shy of passing medical marijuana in his state. And this quote that was found at the end of a very lengthy write-up on the Illinois medical marijuana, this was his quote. In the California experience, virtually anyone can go to any doctor and within 5 minutes get a prescription for medical marijuana. In Illinois, if you don't have a bona fide relationship with that doctor that can be proven, you aren't getting the product. We drafted this bill this way to address issues in California, end quote. 1 or 2 votes shy. When I worked for Normal, I delivered a presentation that was called The Box Canyon, and it's up in our 420 Radio Silver forums. If you're a Silver VIP, you can actually download and watch the thing. In it, I tracked how medical marijuana that began in California with the incredibly inclusive any other illness for which marijuana provides relief, and this West Coast medical marijuana that evolved in Oregon and Washington to large home gardens and 1.5 pounds of weed, has now withered down to just 3 strains of less than 10% THC, no home grow, medicine of last resort, and doctor registration in New Jersey. As I wrote last year, that's the theory of medical marijuana's Box Canyon. It's the idea that if you fight only for medical marijuana, marijuana has to become increasingly medical. And medical marijuana laws have to become increasingly restrictive in order to keep the potheads out. So, what are they doing in Illinois to keep the potheads out? A 2.5 ounce limit every 14 days, purchased at dispensaries only, no home grow allowed. You may qualify only with cancer, glaucoma, HIV/AIDS, Hep C, Lou Gehrig's disease, Crohn's disease, Alzheimer's agitation, cachexia, wasting syndrome, muscular dystrophy, severe fibromyalgia, spinal cord disease, Tarlov cysts, arachnoiditis, hydromyelia, syringomyelia, rheumatoid arthritis, fibrous dysplasia, spinal cord injury, traumatic brain injury, post-concussion syndrome, multiple sclerosis, Arnold-Chiari malformation, and syringomyelia, spinocerebellar ataxia, Parkinson's, Tourette's, myoclonus, dystonia, reflex sympathetic dystrophy, complex regional pain syndromes type 1, causalgia, complex regional pain syndromes type 2, neurofibromatosis, chronic inflammatory demyelinating polyneuropathy, Sjögren's syndrome, lupus, interstitial cystitis, myasthenia gravis, hydrocephalus, nail patella syndrome, or residual limb pain. But only if your doctor and the Department of Health approve you. And this is only a 4-year pilot program that expires if the legislature doesn't reapprove it. So enjoy your legal medicine while you can. We might just take it away in 4 years. The problem with this keep the potheads out mentality is that it never hurts the potheads and always hurts the patients. Taking away home grow from patients doesn't stop illegal growers. It just gives them the patient's business. Restricting limits to the amount that can be possessed just keeps prices artificially high, as patients who could buy in bulk for the year have to buy small amounts every couple of weeks instead. The more restrictions you put on conditions and doctors just mean patients who can't afford doctors or have a less than acceptable condition become criminals or go without an effective medicine. I mean, you don't see anxiety, irritable bowel syndrome, or post-traumatic stress disorder in that Illinois list, do you? Meanwhile, if you're a patient in Colorado or Washington, for anything as severe as terminal cancer to as trivial as a hangnail, you cannot be arrested or punished for your possession of 1 ounce of marijuana. You don't have to see any doctors, get any card, nor pay any fee. In Colorado, you can even grow 3 of your own plants without registries, zip ties, or grower fees. And if you like, you can still become a medical marijuana patient in those states and even have even more liberty to grow and use marijuana. It's always been an untenable position to take that some people are healthy enough to put in a cage over marijuana use. As we first began the fight for marijuana rights, it was necessary to champion just one reason for using marijuana and protect just one class of marijuana users. The prohibition wall of ignorance erected in the 80s needed that crack of Prop 215 to begin to crumble. And medical marijuana has done as many of us predicted. It opened people's minds up to the plant itself and all its uses. Once pot became a safe, effective nausea medicine for Granny, how could it be a demon weed for a college kid? But now, continuing to fight a medical-only fight for marijuana is only going to produce more restrictive, less effective medical marijuana laws. At every successive state, there will be some group of patients who will be left behind to secure marijuana rights for a dwindling group of the most severely ill and disabled. Now, to be fair, that dwindling group does seem to be gaining some new rights, such as non-discrimination in health care, child custody, and employment, but at the cost of home grow and limited possession. These next 4 years are pivotal. Colorado and Washington must provide good examples of legalization in marijuana markets. California, Oregon, Alaska, and Maine need to make the ballot for legalization in 2016. And during this time, we must point out that only legalization can benefit most patients, and anything less is second-class citizenship. Because I believe, and the feds have confirmed, that keeping our movement in a holding pattern with medical marijuana allows them to develop cannabinoid pharmaceuticals. Sativex is already in phase 3 clinical trials right now. Then, those medicines will be given to the medical marijuana patients. You said you wanted medical marijuana. Here it is. And the rest of us will be back to just being potheads. Woo. Have to excuse me for rolling the closer early, but I'm losing my voice. So we'll take it into hour 2, Toker Talk Radio, and maybe we'll play some videos too. I give and I give and I give. Thanks for joining us here. Appreciate it very much. In hour 2, we're going to talk a little bit about the 420 tour that I'm going to go on. And I've got a new Indiegogo campaign up, trying to raise $25,000 for the campaign. I know it's a lot of money, but if you can help donate, please do. That's going to get us our mobile touring studio. Hey, for Brian the Red, I'm Radical Russ. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, take care of each other, tokers.